Hi everybody, my name is Jessica Holyfield. I'm a professional dancer, professional dance choreographer, and dance educator based out of the southeast of the United States. And we're going to do something a little different today. This is a video that is made specifically for Innah Bee because there's a video that she posted. It was quite a few months ago at this point, but it came across my feed very recently because the more K-pop analytics that I do as a dance analyst, the more recommended things pop up as well that come with it. And this video in particular was showcasing what her weaknesses were as to why she hesitates to do boy group choreography as much as she does with a female group choreography. And that got me thinking, because with Innah Bee, I know she's very well established as a K-pop cover artist, and she does a very great job on the production side, the production side and the competency of craft side. So I, as an individual who, as part of my day-to-day, I help dancers be able to find their weaknesses and be able to provide solutions to help them grow, because she has been public to showcase, she's like, here, these are something that I feel insecure about, and I wanted to let you guys know that this is just where I am. I want to be helpful. So if you guys are fans of Innah Bee and you want her to be aware that this is something that was made for her to be helpful, please let her know, because if it's a situation where she's not, she would rather me not have this made, I will kindly take it off, no problem. But just letting you guys know, this is actually made to be helpful for her to be successful and feel comfortable doing more boy group choreography, because as a woman myself, it is tricky to convert your posture of energy to be able to execute boy group choreography as effectively as more feminine styles, because of my own personal background. So I totally understand that, and we're gonna go through it together. So let's go ahead and take a watch at the initial short that prompted me to make this video.
The reason why I don't cover K-pop boy groups that much.
Agree. Also agree. It is a lot. That's a lot of takes too. I understand that. Now this is something that she said, I feel like my body is stiff and uncomfortable. I can help with that. I understand this. I sweat too much and look bad after a few takes. I love that. And it's this quote right here that I want to touch on. All of this won't stop me from practicing harder and working on my weaknesses. For me, like I said, as an individual who loves being helpful and loves being able to, because I'm in a position as a teacher where I have dancers that really want to work on their weaknesses and want to get better. And for me, one of my jobs is to hold that responsibility and help give them tools to make them more successful in it. But of course, it does take their perseverance to do it. She has already showcased perseverance immensely. And so I know for me that these things that I'm going to be talking about, I probably think she's either already working on, or things that, you know, could just need just one or two more refinements and over time. And time may be the one thing and factor to getting her more proficient at doing boy group choreo. Love it. So let's look, I'd say that, let me look at the time for this. 11 months ago. So this was around this time last year that I'm making this too. So, yeah. And, so what we're about to do now is, now that you guys are aware of what I watched that made me want to make this video. Now, I did have her on a poll to take a look at, just a look at her movement anyway, but I really only focused on groups for now. So I hadn't done any soloists yet, but after seeing this, I was like, no better time than now to actually look, knowing that she wants to grow in the boy groups, because that could have been something that I would have brought up, saying I'm curious as to why she doesn't do boy groups. Now I know. So let's go ahead and help a sister out. All right, so this is our first one. So I know she had a part 2 to that video, but it was mostly just her struggling to do this choreography in particular. It's Bouncy by ATEEZ. I've done a full analysis on most of ATEEZ's work, especially on this track, and their newer things I've physically done. Gorilla, Pirate King, and I've done Crazy Form as well. And there'll probably be more that are made. But what we're going to do is, I have a side-by-side, so I already did this, but I hadn't seen it all the way through. So know that this is still kind of like a little blind reaction almost. But I got the audio lined up, so they'll be together. And and we're just going to kind of compare, and what we're really looking for is not does she match them entirely, because if you've watched my ATEEZ analysis, whether it's on Patreon or whatever is released on YouTube, ATEEZ does not do the choreography as proficiently as they could either. And I do touch on that all the time because remember, they're humans. Innah Bee is a human as well. So when you're looking at just how the choreography's integrity is supposed to be, not everybody's going to do it the same. And so for me, we're going to really be looking at how to make Innah Bee feel more comfortable doing this style of choreography. Because we do know with ATEEZ, with Crazy Form especially, because we actually have Innah Bee's take on this as well, it was a very new style for them too. So they had to learn and glean and be inspired and figure it out too, just like all of us cover artists did, you know. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take a watch, and then we're gonna go back and we're gonna analyze it. Nice. Nice. So, honestly, she did a freaking phenomenal job on this one, truly. Even though it may have felt uncomfortable to her, she got her body in the right place for that. Like, this is be very impressed at Innah Bee for this. This looks really, really good. Okay. This is also a side note. So some people have asked me on Patreon, because they've gone through the whole marathon, they're like, Jess, who is your preferred member of ATEEZ when it comes to movement quality or overall aesthetic? Because for me, that's a very, when you look at it objectively, there's so many categories, but they ask for my personal, like, just personal, has nothing to do with objective. And for me, my personal preference on who has moved throughout the discography and on a choreographic front the most effectively is actually Hongjoon. For me, I think whenever you see him in Pirate King all the way through to more recent things, he's very consistent, and he also demonstrates and he compensates for what areas of choreography he may feel a little bit reserved on. He's able to promote with performance to help meet in the middle on that as he continues to grow as a mover. So out of everybody, I picked Hongjoon for my personal preference on how he moves to the type of choreography they were given. That's just a little side note for those of you who are ATEEZ. I think that's how you pronounce the fandom, because I had somebody help me with that. So let's go ahead and take a look at Innah Bee and go through it. Guys, like I said, she did a freaking great job on this, truly. So we're going to have her, well, no, honestly, for most, oh. Well, that's fun. Now it's at 0.5. Let's see if I can get my thing to work. So when you look at all of this, she does a freaking great job. I have zero, there's nothing really to fix on this. It's great. Gonna show you right now. Her weight's in the great spot. Notice it's on the balls of the feet, and that really helps create more leverage whenever you're choosing to shift your weight with the knees. Really great job on that. And she's also doing it in platforms, which is very impressive for a track like this, because there's hinges that are in play, so there's a lot of counterbalance that are required of you. And that was the note that I gave ATEEZ, is that some of them were not on the same plane of hinging, and that's why some of it looked off in the dance practice. But here, noticing, I'll try to say my big note. I do feel like for that little section right there, if you notice with the hits, normally a lot of people choose to drop. They drop in the groove, and then they allow the chest to promote upwards as they're hitting this particular groove. I think you see some of them on ATEEZ do it, but not all of them. And that's exactly what she does. And that's why even that move transition looks really great on her too. So from here, switching it through, honestly, I think my one note for this one of how she could probably feel more comfortable with it, that part looks fine. D. Whenever you watch Yeol's songs, this is Yeol's song, I'm about to do it. Notice how he promotes with his head first. So I think with Innah Bee, I don't know where she started this groove. She did, but notice that she kind of kept it more on the midline. So what I mean by midline, like she kept her energy mostly here. It really could have been because of her shoe choice as to why she decided to do that. Because for that type of groove, you want to really promote the direction forward with the crown of the head, and then allow the body roll to create and fill up that space. So that's one thing that she may have felt pretty awkward doing, and it could simply just be because of the shoes. Now, should that make her change her shoes? Absolutely not. It's just something to be conscious by, that you'll have to, if anything, I don't know how much she refined or redid the choreography, or like went over the choreography when she had her outfit on. I did look at a couple things, just like lifestyle things from her, just so I understand like how she learns choreography, how she preps for a video, that kind of stuff. So I'm very aware of that. But I think that's my one note, is I noticed that she's kind of switching the feet, which is fine, but she's not really committing her weight into this particular groove. And I know that's because with Yeolsung, he's committing more towards the placement, and it's the standing leg that gets most of the weight. But because, I think it's because of her, it's just because of this ending part, just having her commitment promote more forward for that. So committing the head, it's a risk because of the type of shoes she's in. But it's gonna make it feel more full and take up the timing and not feel like we're lagging in space. But that is like the most minimal critique I could give, genuinely. And how she finished it, really great on the personality front. So for this one, she gets an A++. Like, this one is phenomenal, and for a boy group choreo, like, this is very good. Now, I do know this one deemed more intermediate in scale, and the ones, I think the other ATEEZ one is also like around intermediate, and so I feel that there's a good chance she may teeter to that kind of choreography, because these types, and that was actually going to be a recommendation I was going to give her, is whenever you're exploring a style that you may feel not as comfortable with, going with a not advanced polyrhythmic complex equivalence of it, but dipping more into the intermediates within the discography or the type of track, where it's not viral, but it's definitely more applicable or easier to get visually, because I know she has to visually learn, because I don't have tutorials for this. So for her, diving into the more intermediate side of the choreographies is really going to be helpful, and that's not a bad thing at all. It's actually meeting where she is in the middle, because she's able to understand how to pick up the information, but allowing the body, because it does repeat twice, it allows the body to be exposed to the content more in a productive way. I would say a great example is I just very recently did Mason by Dreamcatcher, and it repeated twice, and so for me it was really nice to kind of explore that repetitive movement, but it was still modified or slightly different, so it really helped train your brain to learn how to commit to a groove, but commit to it ever so slightly different based on what your arms are doing. So you can always learn and grow, and that's something that you've seen from Innah Bee for sure, just from her practice. So this was a very, like, when I say great, it was, I don't think she could have done it very, minimally better, but even then, like, this was a freaking amazing run from her. All right, so our next one is BADA with Smoke. Now, here's the tricky thing. Even though BADA is a woman, her choreography tailors towards a more masculine pocket, which is why it's really hard. It's tricky to do. So that's why I picked this one. And I also picked LATRICE's, and you're going to see that one in a little bit too, because LATRICE got a lot of implicit knowledge coming in her body that's going to make that choreography what it looks like. And I've physically done Smoke, and I have physically done Click Like. So I have an empathetic lens to the physicality of it as well, on top of the analytics. So let's go ahead and take a watch. Let's see how Innah Bee does it. Let's go. Nice. Nice. Smoke you up, I'ma smoke you. I'ma smoke you up, I'ma smoke you. Nice. Nice. She did a great job on that. She really did. Okay, so initial thoughts with this. BADA's, like, if you're wanting to do it, because that's another thing too, when you do a K-pop cover, your goal is to look as close to who you're replicating as possible. So for me, my assumption going in, so please correct me if I'm wrong, is Innah Bee's goal is always to look as close to the artist as possible, but if she makes concessions to enhance how she executes the choreography, it is because of her particular growth as an artist, like as a physical dancer. And then she makes certain concessions to make her look like herself. And that's exactly what I do, because with Smoke and with Click Like, that was something that for me, I cannot dance like LATRICE, because my implicit body posture and how I execute movement is not the same as hers. So so I know that going in, and for me, I know that Innah Bee may also be thinking that way as well, you know, and once again, I don't 100% know. But going from the top here, how she sets this up's really nice. My assumption is she's wanting to emulate what BADA is doing because she's even making similar jacket choices. But notice with BADA, BADA uses her diaphragm to help create reverbs of the upper body. The reason why I know that is because I do that a lot, like that, or I can replicate it, like how she specifically does it. Would I physically do it that way to the type of track? I do the setup a little different for me because it feels more comfortable to me on how I hear the music, but I hit the same musicality. Like there's a difference between having synchronicity, but also individuality. And I talk about that often. Now that part there, notice they even BADA added a little reverb. Yeah, like a little extra. It reminds me of Ike whenever she did season 1. So as she dives in, I think this very first one here, I feel there is something to know about this too. Keep in mind, so there's a reason why I did not pick this version for myself to cover, and the reason is there's adrenaline in play on this with BADA because this is like one of the last runs that she does in order to get selected for Chosen Dancer. Even though it's her choreography, she has amped it up, and there's certain ways and concessions that she does the choreography in comparison to when she did it in the preliminary selection of the dancing. And same with LATRICE. There's certain adrenaline facets that come into play on this that really make it stand out in such a way that is almost impossible to replicate because it is not just BADA's implicit understanding, but it's her explicit performance and presentation that she's bringing to the table consciously and subconsciously on this. And that's really, really hard to cover whenever you're in a space where you're dancing by yourself or you have somebody there running lights or something, but you're by yourself. You don't have the environment of those around you, so you don't have that extra build of adrenaline the way that BADA does on her own stuff. So that's something like as a grace point for anybody who does BADA's choreo and uses this is the reference. It is okay if you do not look exactly like her. I didn't pick this version for that reason. I picked her doing a tutorial version, just like I did with Wute doing Law, because how they do the choreography and their dance rank mission, there's so much environmental factor in play that it is a lot more difficult to replicate than if they were just doing it as a tutorial. So that's a fun little fact. If you want to find a reference point of how to actually learn the choreography with the absence of adrenaline, go find a tutorial version that they do. Now from here, seeing this here, that was really great. A lot of people don't get that part right, but she got it right. She did a great job on that. It's hard, and you have to like lock in your torso to get it down. Notice that there's more of a curve. So Innah Bee, it actually has her posture a little bit more straight. And so my in general note for her, and we may see this in some of the other stuff when she does this type of choreography, she's very placed. It's technically correct, but if she wants to have it with that type of tone, settle, like looking settled and grounded in it, like the way BADA's doing it, she wants to think about curving in the center of the torso as she drops down, allowing a little bit more of this body to drop down, which may have been something that we noticed in Bouncy as well. I don't know. Remember, we're looking at like not chronic things, but things that are overlapping between all of her choreographies, that if she was consciously aware that that was happening, then maybe it would help her be able to have more control over how she comes across in choreography. That's mostly what this is. Because let's be honest, it's a lot harder for us to be able to fix things whenever we're not aware of the things to fix. You know, and it's not even something to fix. It's just a preference thing for that little part right there. Throwing it down really great on the energy there. This right heart, that part right there is really nice to see. There is a little accent that is hit by BADA where she hits and then she allows the head to accent as she hits it, as she moves. That's something that Innah Bee didn't quite do there. You can take it up to more of a preference thing. She did hit it on the side, but she didn't add that little extra slap of the head on that part. So I don't know if that was something that was consciously done or unconsciously done, but it is something to take note of if that was something that she wanted to catch, but she didn't know quite how to catch it. It does ride a little bit after that dee-dee-dee-ch. There's like a very particular sound to hit for that part. Now that part right there, because Innah Bee has a little bit more of a stiffer posture while doing this choreography, that little throw didn't feel as full, because notice when you look at BADA's posture on this, and BADA's actually a great freaking person to reference as like a middle ground because she does a lot of Boy Group Choreo. Notice that she has more of a hunch over, which goes back to what made some of those movements look more grounded, but then you have Innah Bee is a little bit straighter. And a lot of that works when you're doing like more feminine style choreo, which is something she is phenomenal at, like truly. And then having it down, nice isolation. She did a great job. you up. This part is great. Gonna smoke you up. Even moving the hips is nice. And boom. Now this part right here, ding, ding. Now this is a 3-part head ISO. Click, so it's ding, ding, drop. That BADA does here. She actually drops it head, shoulder, and then she drops the head again. Ding, ding, ding. That's really tricky to get whenever you're visually learning and you're not familiar with how isolations work or the fundamentals of isolations. I do not know Innah Bee's dance training, but I do know that she has a very extensive history with doing K-pop dance covers, so she's very exposed to a lot of techniques. I don't know how fundamentally sound she is within these techniques, which is absolutely fine. But that may be why that part may not have hit the exact same way as BADA, is because there wasn't a differentiation between the 3-part ISO. But she still did very nice carrying it through with presentation and performance, which was the exact note that I said as to why I prefer Hongjoon out of all the members of ATEEZ for a very similar reason. That part there, once again, you notice that Innah Bee, she has a more stiff posture on that, so she throws it down versus having her body invest in the throws, not just the arm itself. So that could be another thing. So I actually have a little clipboard, so I'm just going to make a little note. So it's now stiff is not a bad thing, it's just an awareness of posture. So her posture is catered more stiff, or how she carries her energy doesn't really involve her torso as much in certain choreos, and I wonder if we're going to see that overlap in some of the other groups. But going back to Bouncy, that was a freaking great run from her, like truly. So that's something that we're noticing here, though, is that even in that throw, notice that BADA is investing with the upper body, not just the arm, so it's not quite isolated. Throwing it down, turning it around, and then she leans, has a nice little reverb. Yeah, so she did a great job on this one. Definitely an above average performance from a lot of them that I've seen. She does a very great job on it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. Okay, here we have LATRICE. This is Click Like. This one also, I think this is her, this is one of her finalist ones. I don't think it was her presenting the choreo. So we're gonna see. So you can see she has the movements correct and her timing is correct, but you notice that she doesn't have as much freedom in using her hips. I mean, there's some cases, but not as much freedom using her hips or usage of where her weight needs to go when she's using her hips or her chest. So doing LATRICE's Click Like very, very, very few people are able to do Click Like close to how LATRICE can do it. I technically don't do Click Like the way LATRICE does it. I physically, implicitly am not in a position where I can in that type of turnaround time. Also, and I gave a lot of my notes. I was like, I don't know why everybody was picking LATRICE's choreo, because that mess is tricky to do if you are not LATRICE. Because, like I said, her implicit knowledge stems from Afro. She's a heavy, heavy Afro background, and you can see that in how she chooses to syncopate throughout her grooves. So, I'm going from the top here. Let me see. How she sets it up is really nice. I can tell, because of how she's wanting to accent with the hips, I can tell this is probably the video that she was referencing, because this is more of a freestyle moment, but she chose to replicate it, which I say, hey, to each their own. She also gives the fit that reminds me of Sayaka from Subakill, so I'm here for it. Ding. Now, notice for this beginning part, we do 10 with Innah Bee. She was setting up her position to where, let me see. I may have to slow this one down here whenever you look. How LATRICE is hitting it, she's using her back. I mean, of course, we see it does feel like Innah Bee is more extending her arm up versus using power of the lat to make that energy come to the forefront, as well as she is placing her foot effectively. But I don't see it. I mean, yes, she is placing her weight on the opposite side, which is fine. But then switching, notice that she is, let me see what's happening. Ding, ding. It does feel like more of the placement of the arms versus the actual switch of the weight there. Because the reason why we can kind of see that is it could be because of her shoes. That's a really big factor. You'd be shocked at how shoes can affect your dancing. 1000%. Her fit's freaking fire though. So it goes ding. Yeah, I think she didn't quite transfer, Innah Bee didn't quite transfer her weight as much over onto the right side as much as she needed to in order to make that appear more effective within the switch of building up the energy of the arms. Then dropping it down, ding, ding, dropping it down, ding, yeah. And that part looked nice, but because she wasn't switching her weight at the forefront, it felt very placed. And so that whole sequence felt very static to the midline. So like to the middle of her body versus the switch, 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 and then it built up in energy. It's kind of the goal that you would want to have when doing LATRICE's stuff in this particular context. Waves it down. Yeah, right there. As she sits, notice she kind of tucks the pelvis. Innah Bee tucks the pelvis under versus actually making the wave and accenting the hip to the outside. Let me actually move my little placement thing. Okay. Yeah, so she moves it, she places the weight, rolls it down, hits it in the hips more. We can actually keep the pelvis tucked under, and so that ends up having our weight more in the middle versus allowing a counterbalance to happen using the hips. So that's a little note there. Then having this ding ding. Notice that the accent is technically on the side, but Innah Bee chose to go forward with it. That's probably why it felt like she wanted some sense of having some difference in terms of how she was coming across in that moment. So that would be my general note. In order to make it feel very personable, you want to use your ISOs of the chest, and that goes to my overall note. I feel like we do use the ISOs, but whenever it's like an implicit way of figuring out how to use your ISOs in your chest, it's a lot harder. Of course, anything implicit is harder. So going back here on this part, notice she brings it around, ding ding, dee dee. The accent that LATRICE does is technically on the foot, but notice that she didn't really let her upper body be influenced by what was happening in the lower body, but that's what happened with Innah Bee. She did. So that would be in a general note, hits back, and by her catering her way more towards the front, she had further to go before the snap, and that's why the timing was slightly off there. Click, like, that's really nice. Boom, do-do-do-do, click, like. That part, let me see. It's really tricky. So LATRICE does it more to the corner. I think both are completely interchangeable. I don't think it really matters. Now, look at how LATRICE does it. She adds a little syncopation of the hip to help ding, 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 ding. Gets that rotation around before she steps out. But then what happens with Innah Bee, it looks like, boom, two. She does the feet technically correct, but she's not really using her hips at all. She is pushing them forward on the accent, but she's not using the hips to help get the rotation around. So that would be in general note of how she may feel a little bit more uncomfortable. Ooh, I just want to see, click like, ooh, I wanna be. That part there, it does feel like, this is one of the biggest examples of an implicit understanding of how to use your hips, because for me, I am not able to move my hips specifically like that. I'm able to get close, but in the sequence of choreography, it's a lot harder. Now, notice that the rotation, yes, they're trying to be the same. Rotation's just slightly off, and it's just because there's a down, there's a doom, doom. It just happens and it syncopates down, whereas here it's just rotating. Innah Bee is rotating it out and around. So that's why it doesn't sit the same way, because if you look, LATRICE keeps it under her, but Innah Bee is making it an accent to the outside, probably because of her implicit understanding of how rotation of the hips works in other K-pop fronts. So that is in no way, all of this is to say, LATRICE's choreography is really, really difficult to replicate if you do not have a background in the style that she's doing. That is all that I'm saying. And Innah Bee, this is one of those things, there's a good chance you probably felt very challenged by this because it has an R&B aesthetic about it, and the movement is so different than your typical femme K-pop type of choreo. So if anything, it's just showing you just there are differences here, but it doesn't discredit Innah Bee at all. Like, she's doing a fantastic job trying to replicate. Like, that sequence was really nice. That whole little bit, gorgeous. Ding, 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 ding. This part right here, it is a situation where Innah Bee is isolating it to using energy in the shoulders, but LATRICE is using her entire back to make this sequence happen. She's using her lats, and that's another, I think that's one of our little things that based on the videos that we're seeing, she's not using. So like Innah Bee in general, as of right now, based on what we're seeing, whenever it could be either just choreography she's not comfortable with, or something, but she doesn't quite use the lat muscles whenever she's hitting a lot of movement that requires power to emulate a particular sound or tonal color in the track. If she wants to replicate it in that way, that is a way that you can create and exude that power without having to have as much of that implicit training involved with some of the sequences. So that's my note for that part in particular. She comes in, click. Also here, Innah Bee is keeping her body linear once again, when this one does call for a lean of the chest. So the chest needs to be unlocked to be in line with the arm, because that's exactly what's happened with LATRICE, and because she kept it up and she didn't quite let the energy shift over into that diagonal to represent. It's a little bit trickier to feel like there's more power in this, as well as not quite engaging the lats. It does feel very arms replaced. Notice also LATRICE is using her core and using her back to set and prep these grooves, but Innah Bee is not quite doing that at this point in time. She's throwing her arms down, using her placing out, let me see. She's using her leg. She is placing more of a rebounded weight on that back leg, LATRICE is. So she goes like there's a lot of accenting weight shifts on this. It's not quite kicking the leg out with no weight on it. So I think that's something that may have made this feel a little bit more not quite as heavy in energy, is that we only step the foot out versus placing, and I know we already see it here, I'm talking about the energy and how you get the foot out, placing some form of weight on it, and noticing as well we are using our shoulders more so than our back, you know, so there is a slight difference there. I think just in general, if Innah Bee used her back more instead of just her arm placement, it would really make a world of a difference on some of these grooves. Right there, that was a nice moment, but she lifted her arm and tried to let her arm compensate for the energy versus the back there. Stepping through, hitting it down. That was nice. That was a great example of she started to use a little bit more of her lat right there, a little bit more in that place, and you could see that. Love that. Hitting it up, leaning. Yeah, this whole sequence is really tricky. If you're off on the groove, it's going to feel off for you. So she hits it to the side. I love that. Ding, 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 ding. And then there's also a in out. So digging it in, crunching that body. Notice that Innah Bee keeps it up versus dropping it and hinging it forward. That's another thing that, in reference to BADA's Choreo to Smoke, that's something that would have helped her there too, is using this part and actually dropping it to make and help cater more weightiness behind the move. So, but remember too, these are not K-pop choreographies. These are professional dancers doing professional dance choreography. It's very different, way more polyrhythmic, a lot more. We're going to put what we want in play, not having to compromise for the sake of singability or anything like that. Does that discredit Innah Bee in any way? No. I think she's doing a fantastic job of trying to cover these choreographies, because they were hard for me. And I learned any and every type of choreography, regardless if it's from the K-pop scene or if it's from the professional scene, you know, online dance training. So like, I'm very familiar with what's out there, and she's doing a pretty good job. Notice she didn't quite use the hips as much on that second one. She kind of hit with the pelvis forward, but kind of let it reverb out however needed, because it goes back to, that's an implicit hip rotation that LATRICE adds to things, because you notice it a couple times for the very beginning of Click Like. You also notice it about the midway as well. So that's something that is really hard to replicate. So you can say she made kind of a concession, and they finish really nice. So all in all, Innah Bee did a pretty great job on this one. But I still think so far her bouncy one is top tier. Let's go ahead and look at the next one. All right, so I decided to bring out a little bit of XG. So this one's more of a, like, definitely it's a girl group, but how their choreography is, I do know Sienna is one of the ones that kind of is in the forefront of their choreographic perspective. I have physically also done this choreography. If you don't see it on YouTube, it is because it is on Patreon, because Girl Gang has not been released on YouTube yet, so you don't get the Jess take yet. But we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take a watch, see what is up.
That we can do whatever the problem. We're not as soon. Workflow, has a game. Never big fights with a girl game. All of my ladies on fire. Rolling with creases, a female empire. Workflow, has a game. Never big fights with a girl game. All of my ladies on fire. Rolling with creases, a female empire.
Nicer for that one. She got the majority of it pretty spot on. It's just that tail end, that little variant at the end. Isolations, whenever you see isos, and because yeah, I just think isolations and learning how to isolate while writing a group is very difficult to do polyrhythmically, and it takes time. For me as a fundamentalist type of teacher, that's something that I have to teach students how to do weekly, and it's still a struggle no matter what. Whenever you do it in choreography, it is just tricky if you don't know what you're looking for. So Innah Bee did a fantastic job on this first half for sure. Whatever the problem, we ain't gonna solve them. Boom, here, workflow, that's okay. Now, something to note here is, I think, just something that could refine, if we're going off of what's already been brought up and talked about, if she used her back more in this section, it would feel more powerful. But she's got the angle right, for sure. Yeah, it does feel very, like she has, it's not dainty, but it doesn't quite have the same degree of power the way that Jurin, who's in the blue, is doing it. And that's why. It's because Jurin's using her back to do it. You know, you notice she's actually hitting it using the lats. Lats is like that little section right here underneath the shoulder blades. It's like that bad boy right there. Like pushing those shoulder blades down is engaging your lats. So, having, boom, yeah. Fights in the girl gang, so they actually hit in the head. She hits up and then she hits down. So that's just more of a technical, like an actual content note, is that she did hit up. It's supposed to be here to here, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because she got her timing right, and because of her fluency in so many different justifications of choreography. Just like for me, there's sometimes that I step out when they're not stepped out, but for me, based on how I'm doing the choreography, it's going to feel better and be better. I think that's absolutely fine. So for me, that's not even like a qualm. That's just if you notice, there is a difference. She did technically hit up when it was supposed to be to the head, but I'm thinking more about her power behind it, and then throwing it up. That part's really nice, but she chose to isolate the hips a little bit more versus involving the chest. And because if you notice with, like, if you look at Kokona and Maya, the chest has the same amount of range going out and in as the hips do in the opposition, and that's something that does feel a little bit maybe over isolated with Innah Bee, is her chest isn't quite as used in that section. So if you look here, she's using more of a pelvic thrust on this part. So that would be in a general note. If she felt like this may have been a little off, that's probably why, is that she didn't use the same amount of range in her chest like she could have, like in the hips, like how XG did it. That part's great, boom, da-da-da. And I think with the throw on the head, that fire, letting the head go with it versus just shampooing it around. Yeah, so notice she kind of just wraps it around. And of course you see most of them, like Maya doesn't really touch her head either. And then Kokona does it. So actually, if we're looking, she's pretty close if you look at the actual order of Kokona. But that was a note that I made with XG when I did their analysis. Because remember, I do dance analysis, so I actually talk to, like, and I refine how the girls could do it too, not just dancers who cover the girls. So for me, my note is, out of all the choreographies that XG does, Girl Gang and left right are their least clean routines out of all of them. Now, are they still freaking clean? Yes, but if you're looking at the squeaky clean captivation of the synchronicity and the unison sometimes that they bring, and tippy toes and mascara and all of those, and shooting star, here, this is where you actually see them have a little bit more, you see more individuality, but it's not quite, the range is not the same for this point exactly. So you notice that, right? So all of this to say, even the groups, because they're human, remember that. And I know that they were astronomically busy the year that Girl Gang and Left Right came out. I know all of this. But just realizing that whenever you do a K-pop cover, you have to understand that with Innah Bee is a great example of this. For me, I also have to puzzle piece the preference of who executed what when. And then the more you have individuals who do not, the more you have a group that not everybody's on the same page on, it makes it harder for a cover artist, if they're individual and they're trying to do the choreography, of figuring out who's the best person to follow. Which is why it's important for the groups themselves to make sure that they're in sync together when they do the choreography, so it actually ends up setting the K-pop cover artists up for success. Now, I know that's not the only reason, but I'm saying, like, give some artists, like the K-pop cover artists, way more slack than you may be, because they have to, I mean, a lot of them don't come at it from a lens that I do because I'm an analyst. And so for me, I analyze, and no one is exempt from refinement. No one at all. ATEEZ 17, even 17, they have some areas they needed to work on too throughout their eras, and we were able to see growth from them. Whenever I did my marathon with them, XG, same thing, and Dreamcatcher, same thing. Like, everybody has chronic things because they're human, right? Innah Bee is a human, and she's doing a freaking fantastic job of every choreography given. Even if some of them don't feel quite as refined, there are reasons for that, and that is absolutely okay. So if anything, I hope this makes you, if you're a fan of her, be more appreciative of how hard she works as a cover artist, because her having to make this choice, my one note is she technically matches Kokona on this, but if you're looking at ideal and how it, like, the best way for it to look, like for me, I kind of mixed how Maya did it and how Jurin did it. I did the head flip of Jurin, but I did the rotation of Maya. Is kind of what I did because it was very clean. But she matched more of what Kokona was doing, except for her rotation. She didn't quite bring it all the way to the back. So it is really hard to have confidence in knowing, did I do it right? Because she's technically not going to look the exact same as the group, because the whole group doesn't look the same with each other either. You know what I mean? But once again, that's just only coming at it from a perfectionistic lens of, like, if you're a perfectionist, which based on the context I've gotten from Innah Bee, I feel like she may be. I am as well. I'm always growing and learning just like she is. And hence why I wanted to be helpful, because I understand and I really empathize with the struggle a lot of times of trying to show competency of crafts within, especially if you have a following that the reason why they follow you is because of your proficiency within it. Because I know for me, especially if I am critical of a particular group and how they execute the choreography, I have to be able to hold it down and showcase that I know what I'm doing myself. So, like, I understand the pressure that I unintentionally put myself in by saying, oh, they need to work on that. Then whenever it's time for me to do the take, I have to be like, okay, I have to make sure I apply my own corrections, you know? So that's just from an empathetic lens, but mine comes from a analytical side, not from a just covering the group. But it's so impressive to see her do this. This part here, so she matches Maya on that part. So notice for this part, muscle game, just more of a placement of shooting it out parallel to the ground. She does lift it a little bit up, so it does look like a little bit of a scooping thing, but nothing too crazy. Hitting, and the girl again, so she's matching Maya. So she comes up, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. This part, now that part in particular, you notice that the actual choreography, it swims out, but the line is still pretty much a line. But notice that Innah Bee actually, I think she ends up over swimming it a little bit in this upper part of the arm. And so that's why it doesn't feel as refined, because hers is chilling. I mean, she is matching Maya technically, but the actual movement is supposed to cater to the side if you watch like Kokona or if you look at Jurin. But it makes sense why she made the choice she did, because of who she is following. But then also when you look at the head ISO, Maya doesn't do the head ISO, but everybody else does. And the head ISO hits twice to go from the head to the chest. But then she does end up doing it, but I think it's because of the combination of the actual position of the arm with how she's doing it. It doesn't feel as refined. So that would be my general note of, like, just being mindful of the position, but also actually didn't technically do it 100% not correctly, but like they weren't as refined in it either. So you can't be like, I can't sit here and be like, oh, Innah Bee, oh, she needs to fix that. No, because I can tell she's doing it so well that you can tell exactly who she's trying to follow. Do you know what I mean? And so that's why it's like that this is absolutely fine, her commentary, but I can still extend the same recommendation to her that I extended to XG themselves when I did my analysis of being very clear on the range of how you want this particular movement to work, because going really big or going really small and isolating it does change how it hits on the timbre of the track. So she did a freaking great job here. It's right up there with Bouncy for me. But if we're looking at it from like a boy group, fish out of water context, Bouncy, she really should be proud of that one. I think we still have a couple more, but let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. Okay, so this next one is a little different. I have physically done Sweet Venom before, but I actually picked this short in comparison to her because I wanted to prove something to you. These are the people who are part of the choreography team for Sweet Venom. So this is not the members. These are, I don't know who is a member and who's not, but some of the people here are either dancers or they're the ones that were a part of the inception of the choreography itself. So you're gonna get a choreographic, like an actual choreographer's like intention behind it, because you do know like it does look a little different. Like if you see If you see like 17's choreographer, he did Born to Be by ITZY. If you see ITZY do it with him, he does it a little differently, you know? And so we're gonna kind of look and see. I know she didn't reference them for this, but I'm gonna show you the similarities here though, because I bet you it's gonna be pretty close. Let's go ahead and take a watch. And then she's the only one who does that second part. This part actually looks great. That she does it exactly like how ENHYPHEN does it. So it's not really, I thought, let's actually talk about, there's only like 2 moves in this. Here's the thing. Innah Bee does it really, really well. There's, for all of them, there's only like 1 or 2 instances if she modified or if she refined like 1 or 2 aspects of it, it would be like a night and day thing in terms of the elevation. But how she's doing it already is really, really good. Like, really good. Now this one is on YouTube, like my version of my take on this. So if you're like, Jessica, I need to see you do it in order for you to prove and validate that you know what you're talking about. I mean I've been analyzing for a long time. Like I've analyzed about as much as I've taught. Like it's something that it helped me when I was training to be to get certified in certain adjudicated credentials. Having to analyze content online was low-key a prerequisite, because that was part of my certification process, was being able to adjudicate something while watching a video instead of watching it live. It's very different. And so I'm very, very familiar with watching videos and giving feedback. Like I astronomically am. So, but if you're an individual who are like, I'd rather see you prove it, I will attach the Sweet Venom just take in the comments, so you're able to see that. Because I know with most of these, and I'll even do click, like, and smoke, so you can really see like, with the specific ones that I am talking with Innah Bee about, like you can see my take on it too, so you understand where I'm coming from and where my refined points are. Because remember, this is to actually be helpful for Innah Bee. This is not in the sense to downplay or degrade or anything. We're here trying to work together because I understand there's so many people that really value her perseverance and grit throughout this, and I really like how she performs in all of this, hence why we're doing a whole analysis. I mean, we're almost running up to an hour at this point, because I think it's really important for us to help each other and work together. Because for me, I've made my YouTube channel to actually be helpful for people, to help people who are fans of groups understand, why do I love this choreography so much? Here's why, because of X, Y, and Z. Ooh, why does this choreography feel off today? Here's why, X, Y, and Z, you know? So I want to be helpful for people, but not only that, individuals who have actually stated, here are my weaknesses and I'm going to keep working on them. As an individual who that's what I do, I want to be able to be helpful, you know? And I don't want her to feel like she's in it alone and it takes a village. Just like with K-pop, it takes the fans supporting the artists in order for them to find, there's sometimes that can be a really huge stepping stone for them to help them reach their goals. For Innah Bee, she has a huge following and a really great and supportive fan base, but I really, as an individual who definitely admires hard work, I want to be able to contribute positively and help her be more successful in the future, you know, if that's something that she wishes, if this is helpful for her in any way. So, but looking at this here from the beginning, she matched very similarly to the choreographers. You know that, right? Like, she did a fantastic job. Oh, sweet. This part looks great. I love her added to the body roll on that. For me, I also added that when I did it. Some people are choosing to just kind of lean into it. For me, I prefer the body roll because it fills up the energy more. Also, no, I think she got the weight shifts right. Yeah. Notice, I think there's a chance she may have over isolated, because when you notice when the twist, it does give a tone walk twist. This is where fundamentals come in. This energy right here gives a tone walk twist from light feet, and that's different than just twisting the heels and isolating from the upper body. So Innah Bee is doing the twist, but keeping her body isolated, so you accent and focal point the legs. But the choreography, you're able to look at all of it because it's all connected. Like the hinge is connected to the twist and the tone walk twist of the feet. So that would be my note for her. It could be like learning, and this is really hard. I've trained in light feet, not extensively, but enough to be able to handle intermediate level choreography from light feet. Understanding that weight shift is really tricky if your body is so used to having more of like a really feminine, very staccato, and being very clear on staccato and legato, but that's like an in-between groove to ride with the rock and in a swing, you know? So that's an overall thing that's really tricky to refine. So that would be my note to her, and that's why that may have felt a little bit more isolated than how others would do it. Bring it in. This part right here looks great. She brings it in. Is your poison. Now there is a step in for that. I know she kind of just stepped it. Step. She did like 3 steps and then she brought it back with the clap. There's a good chance that maybe she didn't want to step back in. Maybe because if she was very close to the camera. Not quite sure. I know she's very familiar with her, where she is. That's super cool. That your poison, it's because whenever she did the triple, she didn't quite swing back up, so that was like there was another rock that wasn't quite represented, because notice whenever they lean, she hits and then she kind of keeps it more diagonal versus actually committing to the rock, which is something that we noticed in LATRICE's choreography, we noticed in BADA's choreography. But this one, because it's a little bit stiffer in the posture, she could have been able to rock and hinge it a little bit more and bridge that gap for herself. So for me, I'm seeing the big main thing for Innah Bee, in order for her to feel more comfortable with choreographies like this, is the commitment to the torso. It is really, really hard to do that though, when you're not used to it. And so that's why I'm trying to troubleshoot and figure out which particular parts of her torso, if she focused on whenever she did choreography, or what to be on the lookout for in choreography that could be helpful for her right now in this moment. You know, I don't quite know. We're just trying to figure stuff out together, you know, and then hopefully, if anything, there's a good chance she's already working on these things, or she may be aware of them already, which for me, I'm like, you go girl, you know, hitting it through, clap. This is still really good and really nice smeeze, really nice and fun. Love that, swinging it through, yeah, so that's a Harlem shake. So in order to make this one, she is choosing to accent using her arms a little bit more, when the accent is actually the rotation of the shoulders. And then after the completion of that third Harlem shake, that promotes the scoop. So there's a bit of a disconnect between her shoulders and her arms as she's doing that particular section. And that's why it may feel like she's just kind of riding it in the middle of the level, because she's not really allowing the rock to transition. There's no rock that's happening, pretty much. And it could just be because of her natural fluency in other K-pop choreos. She normally doesn't really need that in order to have those moments and make those moments justified. Once again, these are not showcasing that she's doing it wrong. It's just refinement on what she's doing to make what she's doing right even more captivating. That's really all it is. So going from here, scooping it in, really nice to see that. Sweet, that part's great, That part's really, really nice, but of course, notice she kind of kept about right here instead of really committing. Maybe a shoe thing too, just like what I've said, shoe choice does play a big role. And I don't know how much whenever she learns the choreography versus when she goes over it. Does she learn it in the shoe she plans to perform it in? I'm not quite sure. Does she have the shoes and then she kind of recalibrates it? Because that does change how the choreography will feel 1000% every single time. It will. But in general, she did a pretty great job on this. Here's the thing. All of these she's done a great job on. All of them. You know, I know some of them needed more refinement compared to others, but there are reasons for that. And it's not because of her incompetency of craft. Not at all. It's more so maybe her body movement language wise is not fluent in that particular style. So it may feel more awkward for her. And that's going to go into, you know, we're going to go into our last one. And I think I noticed it. It's crazy form, and I've physically done this one, so I really understand it. But, I think I'll kind of like round up all of my like tool suggestions and things like that after that last one. But let's go ahead. We're gonna take a look at crazy form. So I got a live version of this, just, you know, to make it a little bit easier for us to see how she does it in comparison to them, which I think is always really fun to see. But let's go ahead and take a watch. That was pretty good. The thing that I noticed with this one the most is her lack of using ISOs to hit bases. And let's talk about, there's 2 cases where that actually is a part of the choreography, and you can tell that there's a little, she compensated for the lack of the over isolation. either with keyframing, or she used it with, she chose to really accent a particular part of the music, so it helped fake it till you make it mentality. But that's being a very smart dancer. She's not going to feel comfortable with all the routines. Hence why we're making this video. Most of these routines, she's not, I bet you she probably wasn't 100% comfortable with, because of a lot of things that we've talked about, because the overlap in all of them is there something either implicitly required in order to do it as authentically within the choreography as possible, or it's a boy group choreography that's along the lines of more high energy, requires more energy and prowess. But I did also include, you know, one like ENHYPHEN. It's a boy group, but it was a little bit more chill, more refined, different type of pocket. But also BADA, who was a woman, but also caters more towards a male, like a boy group kind of posture and presentation. So, but going from here, seeing this from the beginning, this choreo, I am being honest, I really, really like this choreography. I love verse 1 of this choreography more than the entire thing. I love the chorus. First one, that this whole little syncopate, God, it's so good. I love it. Now, remember from the top here, we go, whoa, pelvis, great job. She sets it up so well on here. I think I'm just gonna slow down. 92, 4, 2, 4. Let me see, 92. So there, so she's choosing to do more like a sugar, which is like keeping weight on both legs, but then like shifting it over, that ding ding. And so they're kicking that, and then she ends up kicking it. So I think that was an intentional choice for her. I love how she does that. That's great. She brings it up. I love the commitment to her leg. They all do like a little envelope, which means they go from a straight leg to a bent leg. She just does a fan kick. I love her commitment. You go, girl, because you even have, I think it's like Yo-Song. He ends up bending it a little bit early, so her fan kick looks freaking great. Now this part, my ego in this. Now I think for the second part of that, my ego... Oop, hold on. I gotta make sure I got this right. Ego in this. It does feel like her second half of that doesn't feel as full, and it is simply because she didn't pick up that second foot to the same range that she picked up her first foot. That is the only thing. So that would have just been just a choreographic refinement on that. And I'll say this from real talk. I say a lot of this from an empathetic lens, because for me, I think when I did Pirate King, there was one really frustrating thing about it. Is there's a certain kind of crump jab sequence that happens. The sequence wasn't the problem. It was my execution of my, I think it was my left arm. So whenever I would go click, click, when I would punch down, my left arm would very rarely actually punch down. It would punch to the corner, so it would make it off. And so I actually had to drill, because I learned them in my kitchen, unless it's like really, really full, like Tricky House by Psychers. Oh my God, like that one. Whew, Innah Bee, it makes total sense if you never want to do a Psychers routine. That, girl, I don't know if I want to, because I already did Tricky House, and I'm like, that one made me consider retiring, is really what it felt like. My body was like, girl, you are not 18 anymore. And I'm like, I know. But whenever you hit that click, 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 this one was really hard because I wasn't used to using my back the same way as I was used to hitting my right side. And it's because my right side, because I don't massage out my shoulders as much as I need to for how tense they are, because I do so many head ISOs and a lot of popping technique. This side's looser, and so it's harder for me to have a lot of energy or where to channel the energy as I punch down. So whenever it comes to like picking up the foot and one of them being a little bit higher than the other, you don't realize you do it until you look back at the camera, you're like, something's off, and you look and you're like, oh my gosh, my angle is off. And then when you try to fix it, it's harder to try to fix it when you don't have a mirror. And I don't think she has a mirror at this point, and maybe she does, but it's you know, whenever you don't see yourself, you don't realize the mistakes you make or how close you are into doing it the way that they do until you do a side by side, you know. And I know for her, there's a good chance she filmed it on a really high quality camera. I'm not quite sure. The keyframe lighting is wonderful. But for me, what I do is I just use my iPhone and I just record, and then when I feel like I have a good take, I take it down. I go to the unmirrored version of a dance practice, or the version that I'm trying to do, and I set my phone up and I try to time it to where I watch me dancing next to them. So I basically do this without the software. I just do like the ghetto version of it, like the DIY. And then I look and then I audit myself, just like what she does whenever she initially learns choreography, because I remember watching that video. It was maybe a couple years ago. I don't know if she's that way now. She's grown a a lot in choreography retention because your turnaround time's gotten faster. That's just what happens. The more your body's exposed to the language of movement, the faster it's able to get it authentically. So that's a side note too, is that you can tell that she's been working, putting in work and hustling because her turnaround time's faster. And it's because her body is more used to the movement that she's doing, which shows her competency of the craft that she's choosing to be in, which is great. So all of that to say, what I'm saying is that for her leg, there's a good chance she may not, because of how she films, she may not have been able to like audit and fix that in the moment in comparison, because you know, she really picked up that foot almost a 90 or a 290, but the other one was only chilling about like a 45. She didn't really lift it, and that's why it felt a little bit more muted in that section compared to the previous one she just did. This part of the turn, she did what they did on the sides. Then she did what, then that Sungwa. I like how she did it there. For me, I feel like Sungwa, he really kept it isolated and stiff, but he's singing. So there are justifications for when they make concessions to choreo. Is that thing right there. Because he does use his body, like his body rolls when he does the dance practice. I do remember that. How's it go? Now this part here, it is a switch, so notice she took it and she just kind of punched at the sky. A lot it like it click. It's actually one of those where it's a sequence that kind of transitions, where there's a punch and then there's a lift. So that's just a really small choreographic shift on that. Now this part, click, 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 click. The syncopation happens front, back, front, back. So it's an isolated hip pelvic thrust. Down, boom, 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 syncopated. It's one of my favorite parts of the whole choreo because it feels really interesting to do to that part of the music. It's just cool. And I technically did the BB Trippin' version of it, so some of this 92-4 kick, like that part I didn't really do. I did the 92-4 kick the drum, like it was the original mock draft. So I did the draft version and I liked it. So that's why I picked it. But I love this version too. It's cool. Now and if you notice how she does, she accents boom, boom, like she hits it twice. So technically, choreographically, it's supposed to be front, back, but notice that she just hit it and then reset, and that's why her accents look a little different than theirs. Her power is still very similar, which is great. So my note for her is that just refining her isolations, because we noticed it in some of her choices in her chest and some of the other videos. You also notice it here with her hips. I think focusing on working on the isolations, low-key doing iso drills is what's really going to help her feel more familiar with it. Truly, like that's a really hard groove, ding 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 ding, to keep the essence on after you do la-di la-di boom and boom 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 boom. It's really hard groove to do right. It is. Just my in general note for that is, I think, but you notice with the camera work and how she chose to really accent and commit to what she was comfortable doing. I'm really proud of her for this. I truly am. This is not an easy routine to do. And for me, the only reason why I'm able to do it to a certain degree of success is because of my background of doing online dance training. And I've trained in LA, Atlanta, dance convention. So like I'm very used to learning choreography that's not tailored to K-pop groups. It's tailored to like the dance industry of like complexity and polyrhythms and just different type of postures in that way. So I'm very familiar with that, but for her, she's doing a freaking great job because this was really hard for ATEEZ to do, you know, based on their behind the wheel for that. And I took a look at that and that was a very interesting thing to look at. And so Innah Bee, girl, get your flowers. I'm proud of her for this. This part right here, I love how she presents this. Yeah, right there is really nice. Dingy, that part, wonderful. Boom, put them up, put them up. I love the crossovers because some people may forget to do that, but I like how she hits this there. And then she accents on the back of her shoulder, like here, when, if she was trying to do it the way San does it, now we all know San, how he hits stuff is so freaking full. He actually hits it and reverbs it from the front of the chest. Boom. He hits it from here. Could be because of his crump posture and how he's used to hitting and using his chest, but he hits it, boom, from the chest. But she uses her shoulder, and that's why her reverb is the opposite direction of how San does it. But she did great. She did wonderful. And the fact is, we're able to talk about how incredible of a mover she gets to be for over an hour, but also figure out ways of how can we help Innah Bee feel more comfortable with boy groups. Like this is, I mean, honestly, she's done a fantastic job that made this so enjoyable for me, because for me, I understand her perseverance and I understand her grit and I understand the perfectionist mentality from an empathetic lens and from teaching people who also have that I'm really proud of the fact that she still does subject herself to learning choreos like this, because she knows and understands those that support her would really love seeing her explore this more. And so that's why I wanted to be helpful in some way, like in this video, to be able to help her on her journey to where maybe it kind of helps expedite some things that maybe were a little bit more chronic for her. Don't quite know. You never know. I mean, because for me, I always feel appreciative whenever people give me feedback and they're like, if you especially if I'm like, I don't know how to fix this, can you help me? And if somebody's like, hey, try it in this way, I'm always very helpful in that. So this has been wonderful. Thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, like I said, this was made specifically to be helpful to Innah Bee if she chooses to want to, if she ever watches this, but also to those of you who support K-pop cover artists. This is something to where it's like, I know she's very well known in the K-pop cover scene, as she should be. I think she is a wonderful example of showcasing growth and showcasing being vulnerable, but also allowing herself the opportunity to grow, especially during times where she may not feel super comfortable with it. It's very inspiring for people to see that. And it made me very excited about the opportunity to possibly be helpful in a certain way. So if you're a fan of Innah Bee and you think this could be helpful for her, please let her know in some way, shape, or form. That's why I made it, like I said. And because also, if some of the things that I said, she's not comfortable with being public, that's absolutely fine, and I'm more than willing to make this private or just separately accessible to just her. That is absolutely totally fine, because remember, like I said, I am a dance analyst, but I am a dance educator and a dance teacher, where my day-to-day is working with students who have multiple postures and pockets of styles that they're comfortable in, but whenever they're trying to do other styles, of street styles especially, they feel not as comfortable. So I've had to spend most of my dance career as an educator figuring out ways to bridge the gap between one style to another. So for me, really seeing that natural short where she was like, these are my weaknesses that I have with boy groups, I'm like, as somebody who's had to walk through that myself firsthand, I want to be able to help in any way that I can. So that's why I have it here. Thank you guys again for watching. Like I've said, I'm Jess. I will attach my takes of some of these in the description so you can understand where I'm coming from and me attempting to apply my own corrections. And I'm a lead by example individual too. I'm not just gonna sit here and do critiques or say negative things, because I really typically try to refrain from saying negative things. There's very few topics where I'm like, that's not okay. In this case, everything was wonderful. And how she came across and how she held herself and used her performance really reminded me a lot of how Hongjun with ATEEZ, over his discography within his own choreography that he would do with the group, how he was able to showcase and grow within. So that's a really great skill to have. Once again, I'm Jess, and I will catch you on the flip side. Bye!